Hi everybody, it's Sarah Cray with Let's Make Art, and I teach watercolor, and today we are doing Winter Forest. I love this project. I kind of love painting landscapes now, and we will be doing this project in 6 steps.
I feel like you've always loved to paint landscapes.
Okay, not true actually, because in one tutorial like a year or so ago, I think Michael was filming that one, and he said, what do you struggle with painting the most?
Landscapes.
And I said landscapes. And then I made it my mission to like be better at them.
That's what it was.
And I went on this quest to learn, and now I'm sharing that knowledge with you. So I'm so excited to teach you guys how to do this.
Wow.
We have Keenan here working the cameras.
Hello.
And we will be doing this project in 6 steps. Our very first step is we're going to sketch our hills and put in our sky. Our second step, we will be putting in a little bit of salt and our first layer of trees. Our third step is we will be doing our second layer of trees. Our fourth step, we will be doing our third layer of trees. Our fifth step, we'll be putting in our shadows on our trees. And our very last step is snow, some snow on the sky and on our trees.
Got through the steps.
You guys won't see this, but I had to do that in quite a few takes. So I'm really excited I got through that. Okay, the supplies that we're using. We have 3 paintbrushes that we're using here, around 2, around 6, and a wash, 1-inch wash. These are our Let's Make Art Classic series. Our 2 and 6 are our go-to brushes, but I'm starting to bring in other brushes to our tutorials to teach you guys a little bit better, so I'm excited for that. And we're using Let's Make Art watercolor paper. This is a wood pulp paper. Please make sure that you paint on the more textured side. That is the paintable side. And we are using 4 colors in this project. So our very first color is space blue. Our second color is yellow ochre. Our third color is pine green. And our last color is bleed proof white, which is so handy to have. So even if you guys didn't purchase this box and you just kind of stumbled on this tutorial and you're learning watercolor, invest in some bleed proof white. It is worth it. It's so wonderful.
It's so fun too.
It's so great. Okay, we do not have an outline with this project, which is fine. You guys can do this. And let's do our oath, and then we will get to painting. So if you can raise your right hand and repeat after me. I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise not to compare my work.
Promise not to compare my work.
And I promise to have fun.
And I promise to have fun.
And we're just here having fun. That's all we're doing today. Not a big deal. Just hanging out with friends and painting.
Happily.
And finding the joy of watercolor.
Yes.
Because watercolor is so great, you guys. I love it.
It's comforting. It's always there for you. You can always trust it to not obey you initially.
You can always trust it to not do what you want it to
do. You give a toddler an egg, they're gonna break it, whether you tell them not to or to. They're gonna break it. Watercolor's the same way.
Watercolor is just gonna have its own mind, and you just say, I'm not mad about it, and you appreciate it for what it is, and you move on. And it's actually really freeing and wonderful to paint that way.
Just like a toddler.
Just like a toddler.
Free and wonderful.
Okay, so I taped my paper down and I have a pencil, and I'm just gonna do 2 hills, like that. And you guys can change this. Maybe you want this to be a more mountainside, so it's kind of more sharper and jagged, like the top of a mountain. I was going for just like soft, snowy hills. Can they even see that on the screen? Should I do it darker?
Maybe a little darker. I could do the side camera.
Camera. There we go. So 1, 2.
That's nice.
Okay?
Okay.
Now I'm gonna grab my 1-inch brush, get it wet, and I'm gonna mix a desaturated bluish, grayish, greenish sky. I'm gonna take a little bit of space blue and a tiny bit of pine green. And I'm gonna add water to that. And you guys can decide how blue or how green you want this sky to be. This is your painting. You can do whatever you want. Now, before I actually lay this down, I'm gonna grab some salt. Now, the salt that I'm using is the McCormick sea salt grinder. This is my favorite salt to use when painting. And one little tip for you guys, the reason why I like it is because it has a ground grinder, so I get different size
Crystals.
Crystals. But one thing that I like to do, because sometimes these are so big that I end up getting really large salt textures on my painting, which depending what I'm trying to do, that's fine. But on, like for this painting, because I want it to almost seem like texture of snow falling, I don't want the salt to be too big. I want it to feel like small. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grind some salt on the side, and then I take the bottom of the salt.
I've seen this in movies.
And I just crush it so it's finer. And that is the salt that I'm going to use to go over my sky when I paint. So these are much smaller pieces now. I don't know if it's breaking as well. I usually do this on my wood desk. This is breaking, right?
It's mostly wood.
Okay, I think that's good. Salt always kind of ends up surprising you, but if I can, you know, help it kind of do what I want, then that's
pictured
good.
like in a cartoon animated thing of salt, just ha! Ah! Salt! How did you get here?
Okay, so I have my salt ready to go. I have my blue color for my sky, and I'm going to take my 1-inch brush and I'm just going to paint horizontal. Now you can decide how light or dark you want this sky to be. I'm going to stay with a light to medium value. And I'm going to actually paint a little bit darker. I'm going to do, I haven't even finished this layer, but already looking at it, I'm like, needs to be darker. So I'm just going to mix some more, add water to it. There we go, that feels better. And you can overlap on your hills because we're going to be covering those with trees anyway. Make sure you go edge to edge so you get a nice, hopefully nice clean edge when you tear your paper off. Okay, and now when it's nice and wet, I'm going to take my salt and I'm going to sprinkle it across my sky. My crushed up salt. If you have table salt, I actually think that that would be a good size for this part.
Because it's already finer.
Because it's already nice and fine.
What if you did powdered sugar?
You could lick your painting and it would taste better.
Stop
but
it.
I don't know if
that
it's actually...
sounds amazing.
Okay, now when you put salt in a painting, it doesn't move right away. You got to give it a minute, and as it dries, that's when you start to see the reaction. And so while this is still damp like this, we're going to want to do our first layer of trees. Now the reason why we want to do it when the sky is still wet is because then the colors that you put down or the marks that you put down will diffuse and it will become fuzzy. And that is a really easy way to distinguish what is far away and kind of give you that like bokeh effect, like that fuzziness.
I love the bokeh effect.
So I'm going to mix a darker value of essentially this same color. I'll probably add a little bit more yellow so it's more green. But I'm kind of staying within this kind of turquoisey, pops of green, little hints of blue color. I'm going to dip my paintbrush, my round 6, so it's not too much color. And I'm going to start painting. Okay. Now what I'm doing here, as you can see, is I waited too long to put this down. You see how it's not moving?
Yep.
Okay, when that happens, that's not a big deal. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lift this up. Okay?
Oh, nice.
And I'm just going to re-wet the area. Now I do have salt on it, so I'm just going to scrape over it. And I'm just going to do the bottom. I don't have to do the top. Okay, now when it's wet like this, I'm going to go, there we go. See how it's just blending out? That's what we want. And you might be like, I'm sorry, trees? And you're like, yes, just hold on. We're only on our first layer here. So I'm going to do this.
This is only step 2 of 3 in 4.
So these are maybe about 1 inch tall. Now you don't want this part to be too short, like height-wise, because we're gonna be painting trees on top of this, and if the trees that you layer on top of this end up being so tall that they cover all of this, and it's just like, what's the point of this a little bit? You know what I mean? You wanna make sure that these kind of fuzzy blending lines that we're putting in here stick out at the end a little bit. You can see them here.
To add the little bit of depth in there.
Yeah. So this is probably a light to mid value we're putting in here. So it's not too dark, but at least it's showing up against our sky. And can you see what that salt has done to our sky?
Yes.
Doesn't that look like snow?
Yes. I feel like I said this before, but yes.
Just makes me really excited.
I forgot you put salt down, so that was awesome when you pointed that out.
Yeah.
And it's done.
Our painting's done. Good job.
Oh, you went, oh, the whole thing. Oh.
And I'm going to put a little bit kind of where this is going in. I'm going to do some work here, just kind of putting color down in there, but I'm not going to go too detailed. This is really going to shine when we do our next couple steps. Look at that. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we are going to move on to step 3. We're going to do our third layer here. Now,
no, our second layer.
Gosh dang it. I really messed myself up with those numbers. We're doing our second layer of trees. Now I have some salt here that's kind of in my trees. I'm just going to take that out. It's not too crazy, but just a few granules are kind of getting in the way. Okay. Also, I want to point out that when you're doing these tree lines on these hills, they don't have to be perfectly straight, like even on the bottom. You know what I mean? Like it can start, it can curve in, it can go back up. This can curve and go back down. Like, give yourself freedom to have a wonky tree line. I feel like that's more true anyway to what you would see.
Totally.
Instead of it just being like totally even across the whole
you may
thing.
not be painting heel. You got a different tree line.
They didn't see that joke.
Dang it.
We didn't keep that part.
I'm so confused. It's not an inside joke. You were going to be part of it.
Okay. So now that we're going to do our second layer, we're essentially going to do the same thing. We're going to add more trees because we want to add to our layers of trees to make it seem like a forest. And we want these to be a little bit more defined in shape, but still not super sharp. So your paper still wants to be at least a little bit damp so you can kind of see form, but not like, we want a little bit of fuzz. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Now that's just tricky to test your paper of when to do that. So let's test it. So I'm using my round 6. I'm just going to mix a darker value than what I have here. Sorry, my reference photo, I didn't even. And just so you guys know, like printing is a little bit different than the original paintings, mostly because like the printers are different than our paint colors. So this one is brighter, a little bit more brighter than our reference photo. So there's nothing wrong with how you're mixing your paints. That's just the nature of reproduction of prints most of the time. So I don't want you guys to worry if you're seeing like, why is this like gray? You know what I'm saying?
I do.
Okay, so now we're gonna start kind of doing more the tree shape. And I'm starting to put it in. That might be a little bit too wet on the left-hand side. I'm gonna try the right-hand side. So I'm gonna start with, oh, that feels better. So essentially we're kind of putting in like triangle shaped trees here. So we want to be able to see the tips. We want to be able to see the hint of a form, but we don't want these marks to stay sharp. So what's kind of happening over here is good. This is kind of what we're looking for. What happened over here, this bled out too much to where you can't even really tell. This, at least it's still keeping a little bit of form. So just kind of keep messing with different parts until you think your paper is at that right dryness level or damp level to give you what you're looking for. The nice thing about this too is just like the more layers, like it doesn't hurt to test it and then for it not to be ready. That's not going to hurt your painting because you're just adding more layers on top. As long as you can paint a darker value on top of whatever you're putting down for our final layer of trees, you're not hurting your painting. You see what I'm saying?
I think so. To follow along with that thought process though, with the layers, when it comes to the height difference, you want that first layer to be slightly taller, right?
Yeah.
So that they still see the fuzz.
Yeah.
Okay.
As long as when you're putting in your last layer of trees, your final, so if we're looking at our reference photo here, like our sharp, dark trees that are here in our front, that you can definitely see the form. As long as you can see that and then the hints behind it, you're good to go.
Okay.
So in some areas, like maybe here we only see that fuzz a little bit. This one we see it more, like there can be variation between it, but try not to cover up too much. Just adjust the height of your tree so there's different peekaboos of the different layers.
Surprises.
Yeah.
I just thought of a cool addition for this project.
Okay.
A Santa sleigh
Oh.
in the corner, leaving the painting.
Okay. I like that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to give this a second to dry a little bit more because this side is still not ready. If you have a heat gun, you can use a heat gun. I'm going to try this. I'm going to be professional about this.
Nice. Energy efficient.
There we go. Okay, that is much better of what I'm looking for.
Ah.
So
for
you
your
see,
second layer.
For my second layer. And I can even go a lighter value too. But you see how I'm keeping the shape? It's keeping the shape.
Yeah.
I just said the same thing twice. I'm keeping the shape, keeping the shape.
That's 4. But yes.
And sometimes what I'll do too is like, I'll just put in the tips of the trees. So it's like boop, 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 boop. So it's just little hints of the top of the trees. And this part takes a very, very long time. I remember when I was making this project, I was like, oh, okay, these are a million little trees we're putting in here.
Worth it.
And at this painting, your painting is not going to look like the reference photo. So don't stress if you're like, this doesn't look anything like what it should at the end. It's not supposed to yet. Give yourself a break and let your painting be something before you make a decision on it. Let's try this left-hand side.
I love the greens that are going on right now.
Yeah. Now, when I'm doing my trees here, I'm being a little bit loose with it, which means like I'm not spending too much time making sure that my brush strokes or even my overall, I'm not being too precise here. And that's because I know that I'm just gonna paint on top of it anyway. I'm just trying to give the hint of form here. So if your trees aren't looking too great at this point, that's not a huge deal. Like don't get too worked up about it. Don't feel like you're doing something wrong. And what I say, like, I'm not, like when I'm putting in my tree trunk, it's a thick line. Where when I do my like final sharper one, I want to make sure that I'm doing thin lines and being a little bit more, like finessing it a little bit more. But because it's still damp, it's just kind of bleeding out, and that's okay. That's what we're looking for here. And already, doesn't it start to feel like you can kind of see the layers of the trees?
Yes.
So we're not close to it being the reference photo, but maybe at this point you're like, oh, okay, I can keep going. It's gonna be okay.
We're still here to be happy and have fun. These trees are gonna pop eventually.
Yes.
Gotta trust it.
And then what I wanted to do, like what I did in this reference photo, is I wanted to make sure that this left hand, or this right hand hill that's moving down is sharper. So like right here where they kind of overlap, I kept this really fuzzy on purpose because I wanted this to stay nice and sharp. I wanted that to be pushed back further and this be pulled forward. So when I'm doing this part here, I'm going to do a little bit of hints, but not as detailed as what I'm going to do in front. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And if you've been waiting for your paper to be dry, to be like that level of dampness that we're looking for to do this part, and it just dried out too much because you waited too long, you can just re-wet the area again. It's not a big deal. So if that happens, re-wet the area like we did with when I first tried to put down the layer.
So still take your time. But when you get it wet, you got to move.
Yeah, I feel like part of watercolor and what's a little bit tricky is knowing when you need to leave it alone and when you need to let it dry or when you need to work quickly. It's like a dance. You go in and you go back out and you do this part and you do this part, and you just have to be like flexible pretty much. But remember that you can make adjustments to help with that. So if you were listening to me and I waited too long to go back into that painting and your painting is now dry, re-wet the area and then you can go back into it. If you re-wet it too much though, then you're gonna have to wait for it to like halfway dry before you go back into it.
It's a timing thing.
It is a timing thing, and I know it's super frustrating.
I know what you're saying, but I can't quite figure it out myself, so it makes sense what you're saying.
The best way to improve upon that is to just keep painting. And I know that that's really frustrating because to try something new is just hard by itself. And then to like keep messing up or feeling like you're not getting it and then to keep going is like really, really hard. And I want to acknowledge that. But it's true of like to improve that skill, to improve getting used to the supplies or the techniques, the best way to learn is to just keep going and to just keep painting, just keep trying, even when you feel discouraged, even when you feel frustrated. And I know that's easier said than done, but I want to acknowledge it.
One thing that I've felt when painting is lost.
Mm-hmm.
Where I'm doing something and it doesn't matter how many tutorials I've been a part of. There are things that I don't know if I don't practice.
Uh-huh.
And man, there's been a time where, I don't even remember what it was, but I just stared at it and I was confused and I felt lost because I didn't know how to progress with that specific thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the comfort that I found was that it's just a painting, and this was a great learning process, and I still enjoyed up until I got confused.
Yeah. And then if you get to a spot where you're like, oh, I'm just lost. I really don't know what I should do next. I wish that there was like, what I would say is that if you get to that point, the best thing that you can do is to make a decision, pay attention to what that decision was and what problem you faced, and then pay attention to the outcome. Because even if it doesn't solve your problem, you would then know when you're at that crossroads again on your next project, you have information to pull from of what worked and what didn't. So don't let that stop you. Just say, okay, I'm going to try this. And then just kind of like be aware of what it is that you tried, how it felt, what worked, what didn't work. And then if you find yourself in that position again, you have at least a little bit more information to go off of. Okay, so I did my second layer and I'm feeling pretty good. This is starting to feel like I got layers of trees going on here. Now just to kind of really help it, I'm going to switch to my 2 and I'm going to do some little medium value tree tops here and there, just to get this sense of sharper trees here and there. Because sometimes like the top of my trees just blend, it became like just a blob, which is fine, but I just want some definition here and there in a medium value. I'm going to have it in a dark value, but if we really want these layers to feel good, then we're going to want it in the medium value as well. And it doesn't have to be across the whole thing, just really just here and there. You can see my background there. I'm going to leave that. I think that's actually really lovely. Just that slight hint of green back there. Okay, that feels pretty good.
I like that.
And we're gonna let that dry. And Keenan, do you mind going to the side close-up camera so they can see the sky? Because it's really cool.
It is really cool.
And I want them to like see what's happening here. Yeah, doesn't that look like snow? Ah, I love that. I love that so much.
It's snowing. Oh my gosh. It looks even bigger on a bigger screen. Looks even better on a bigger screen.
I thought you meant to say bigger on a bigger screen on purpose.
Nope.
I was like, Keenan, you're so funny.
Nope, it was completely accidental.
Okay, while we're waiting for this to dry, I'm going to practice my trees. We'll do a little mini tree lesson. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So grab any color, and I'm going to use my round 2. And I'm going to use space blue just because it's a nice dark value. You'll be able to see that well. And I start with my trunk. It's okay if you skip lines, okay? Because we're going to be covering this up anyway. Just making sure I'm not smearing underneath. Okay. The shape that you want to keep in mind is triangle shape, okay? If you're doing tree illustrations, like the boom Christmas tree. You know what I mean?
Oh,
if we
yeah.
want it to be a little bit more realistic, we got to think about the needles, the branches, and those things kind of pull together. How do I say this? Like, I'm not going to be doing, okay, our brain wants to do this, but this doesn't really give us an accurate representation, even though we can tell that's a tree.
It looks like what you would find on a legend for a map. It's like, oh, this is a tree.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, got it.
So if we just want to take it a step, like I would say this is a basic form. This is a little bit more real. Like this is step 1 tree. This is step 2 tree.
That could be a leaf to a different tree.
Oh yeah, this could be even just like a pine.
Pine leaf tree.
Pine
stem stick.
Step 1 tree, step 2 tree. We're gonna move on to step 3 tree. So I'm gonna start with my trunk.
Step 3 tree.
And some artists will do little branches, boop, like coming out. And if you notice, my branches are getting longer as I get to the bottom, and that's because trees kind of grow up, which means the smaller pieces are on the very top and the outside, and the larger pieces and the thicker pieces are at the bottom and in the middle.
They're meant to use for climbing.
Yes. And then what I like to do is I like to do different marks. So just pay attention. You can even do it off to the side. Look at your mark making. Try and play with that. And what I mean play with that, don't just do dots. Do dashes. Change the angle of the dashes. Go this way, go to the right, go up. Make them smaller. Push harder and make them thicker. Okay? Mark making is super important in painting. Because what happens is our brain likes to make the same marks over and over again. Like if you were to paint a tree, I can see when you're just starting wanting to just do the same marks over and over, probably dots. But that doesn't translate to what we would totally see in nature because there's different thicknesses because some areas are smaller and some are bigger. So when I do the very top of my tree, I'm going to do really thin marks, spaced out, okay? And then as I work my way down, let your marks be thicker because the branches are thicker. They're older. Now the reason why I'm lifting up my brush is because branches and pine needles are little pieces to this tree, which means you can see light through them. So now that I'm getting towards my bottom of my tree, I'm doing more dashes. So you see the difference in the size of my mark from here to here?
Yes.
Yes. Pay attention to that. That's really going to help your tree feel real. Now when you get to the edges here, you can go a little bit smaller. You don't have to leave the small thing totally behind. And there's my tree.
That's a great tree.
Now there's different types of trees. There are some trees where the branches go down. There are even some trees where the branches actually go up, like this.
Oh. Then there are trees that are getting too close to power lines, and a side of them has to be cut
There are
off.
trees that are growing, and then a power line, it's like, tree.
Yes, that's what it is.
So, I mean, there's even some trees where they're actually really, really sparse. And what you'll see is you'll see the trunk and maybe these branches actually make up the most of it, you know? I've seen trees like this.
Totally.
So look at what's around you. You can look at the reference photo. The reference photo, I mostly went with this type of tree, and I kept it simple. However, there's different types of trees next to each other, things like that. So like, just play around with it, experiment. But I hope this helps you give you some idea of how I like to do my tree silhouettes. Now, what's a little bit tricky is these trees are a lot smaller than what's going to be painted here. And when it's smaller, it's just harder to give that amount of detail when it's nice and tiny. So I just want to call that out.
Okay.
Okay.
Good call out.
I'm kind of really proud of this tree that's going on here. Like
That blue one?
that's a dang tree.
I know, that's a tree.
I actually really like this one too. I think this one's cute.
I'm stuck on that leaf.
This
Tree.
one?
Yeah, I love it.
Really?
I don't know. I just keep staring at it.
Well, if you guys want to impress Keenan, do
No,
a forest
this is
full of these.
So I think this is my theory.
Okay.
It kind of looks like a feather also, and it's making me think of an arrow.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of archery.
Okay.
Target archery.
That's cool.
I have a bow.
That's really
35-pound recurve. It's a takedown bow. It's 3 pieces. It's pretty neat.
that's really impressive,
Thank
Keenan.
you. Also, I've made PVC pipe bows.
Wow.
I painted them to look like wood. I tricked someone.
It's actually really cool.
Thank you. I'll show you a video.
Okay, now I'm going to test to see if I'm ready for my third layer of trees. So I'm just going to, I picked up a dark value. We want our values to be, if before we're painting light to medium values, now we're doing medium to dark values. And I'm just going to start. Oh, and that stayed sharp. Beautiful. And now my tree.
Oh yeah, that tree is popping.
There we go. And we're literally just going to repeat that over and over and over again.
But this is an excellent exercise because these trees, they're difficult for me to get. And I think I've done several, but I still struggle with them. So this is a great project for if you really want to start to crush trees.
Yeah, it's a great practice because you have to paint so many of them. And also when you paint so many of them, it's okay if some of them like don't turn out great. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And kind of what I'm doing here, so I started putting in dark value trees, and you can even like go in between and do like more medium value top of a tree here and there too. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I don't want there to be too much of a gap in values between what I'm painting on and what I'm currently painting. So if my background is too light in value, and then I'm painting some really, really dark trees right on top, I'll still get a sense of depth, but quite not as much if I had a more full range of values in between. So if you're putting your trees down and you're noticing like, dang, my background is super light and my trees are really, really dark, then grab a medium value and add some medium value trees as you're putting your dark trees.
I keep getting Iron Giant vibes.
Okay.
And I would like to submit a request to have an Iron Giant project.
I don't think legally we can do that.
I'll call them.
Okay, if you get permission.
Who is it?
Done.
Pixar? Disney?
I don't think it's either of those actually.
Those are the only two that I know.
I feel like it's a different one. Is it DreamWorks?
DreamWorks? Yes, it is.
Is it?
It's DreamWorks. Who is that?
I don't.
Bruce Willis?
Yep, that's it.
Call him Bruce. I have to know a Bruce.
You know a Bruce.
I know a Bruce. I'll call him.
Call him.
He knows the Willis
You're
one.
like, can I just paint this? He's like,
Who is this?
Now remember to add variation to the height of your trees, the width of your trees, the color of your trees.
I used to love the Iron Giant so much that I was going to name my firstborn son Hogarth Hughes.
Hogarth. What a name.
I know. I was definitely going to name him Hogarth.
That's pretty cool though.
It was. Do you know that Vin Diesel was the Iron Giant?
No?
Harry Connick Jr. was Dean? Do you know who Harry Connick Jr. is?
Yes, I know who that is.
Jennifer Aniston was Annie Hughes?
Oh my gosh.
These are some names.
They are. Keenan's mind is currently being blown right now.
Listen, I was going to contact DreamWorks during this tutorial, and it might happen.
Just call Vin Diesel.
Oh, I know him. I don't know him. I'm just going to go onto his Instagram, and I'm going to add him and say, listen, can we paint the Iron Giant that you voiced? I feel like that's close enough.
And then do you want to be a guest on this?
Please come
and
paint the Iron Giant.
with us?
Yes.
So the celebrity paint-along?
Yes.
That would actually be so cool.
That'd be so cool.
And if you're like, Sarah, you've abandoned me. What are we doing? We're painting trees.
He shows up. We don't have an Iron Giant project because it's not legal. And I'm stuck here alone with Vin Diesel and an Iron Giant that I've got to come up with. It would be a silver plate that I color. Totally worth it. Completely unrelated.
Yeah.
Do you know Vin Diesel will
Done Dungeons and Dragons?
Yes.
Yes, I did know that.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Why don't you tell our friends what we're talking about?
Vin Diesel, if you're not familiar with who he is, he's an actor, a celebrity, really great guy. He's a big fan of Dungeons and Dragons. He has a very unique voice. And he is a dungeon master, a DM as they call it in the Dungeons and Dragons world. And he will, for a fee, because he's
busy.
Yeah. He's a busy man and requires
He should
funds.
be paid for his time.
Yeah, totally. He will DM your D&D campaign with you.
He will fly out
will come to
and
your
be
D&D
the dungeon master for your D&D game.
Yes. Campaign. It's not a game,
so
Sarah.
Cool. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's a campaign.
I know. I've played it.
No, I know. It's intense. But some campaigns, I know a campaign going on right now that they're on their 30th? No. They're on their 67th week.
Whoa.
Yes, I think. Somewhere in the 60s. Sorry about the side tangent.
That's okay. We had a D&D campaign going, but then I had my son, Arlo, and we never started back up.
He didn't get tied into the campaign. That's unfortunate.
I got busy, you know?
Yeah. That's on your DM. He should have kept it going. If it was Vin Diesel, it probably would have been still going.
Well, then also COVID happened, and we weren't allowed to see people, and we were quarantined. Everybody was in their house for a year.
I guess that's true, too. Dang it.
There's a pandemic happening.
Thanks a lot, D&D.
Okay, so I'm about halfway done putting in my trees, and I'm going to do sharper ones here, and then I might do a couple more tree tops here to help with the layering, but I really love this little blue tree that I did here. I think that's cute.
That one in the front. It's cool to see it from a distance, too.
So right now I'm just kind of putting in the tops, or I guess not the tops, but the trunks. Try and pay attention to your spacing. I'm just noticing that I'm doing it too even. And you can start, like, I know in my examples I started at the top and then went down, but you can start at the bottom and move up. Like, play around with it. For some people it's easier to start bigger and then go smaller, or do the opposite. So find whatever works for you. Also, embrace and acknowledge that there are different types of trees, different size of trees, wonky trees, short trees, baby trees.
Fallen trees.
Like, don't get too caught up in how your trees, each one doesn't need to be perfect. And also, people looking at this are gonna be like, oh, trees, cool, like a forest, I got it.
Oh, I've seen that hill before. This could be like a short film movie cover.
What? What'd you say?
You could call it, it could be named Blizzards on the Hill. and it would be about nothing.
Keenan's gonna make up like a...
I have a whole movie about it. In a forest.
Yep. Keep going.
Where one hill just isn't enough.
Where one layer of trees, not enough trees.
Where step 2 might look like step 3,
and
but it's actually step 4.
And you don't know if your paper is too wet or too dry. Do you like me trying to do a deep voice?
I love it. So good.
Okay, we're getting close, you guys. We're getting close. You're doing good. Stick with it. Okay. And then on this left-hand side, I'm going to do some trees, but I don't want them to be as dark a value as the one I just put down. They're going to stay in the medium value. And try not to get your wrist in the trees that you just painted. And you can always add a little bit of water to your brush if you need help making it a lighter value. We're just giving the hints of a tree, but we want these to be farther away from us. So due to atmospheric perspective, they're not going to be as sharp, as contrasty, as dark. Sometimes I just do kind of swoops back and forth too. If I'm trying to do like a quick tree, I'll paint a trunk like so, try and make it straight, even though trees aren't always straight. And then I just kind of swoop, boop, 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 boop. It's not realistic and it's not nearly as nice as the one I kind of detailed out for you. But if you're just trying to get the hint of the overall form, that's a quick way where you can kind of get that in there.
That tree popped up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Look at those things.
Look at that. And I hope, and just to like point out, like where I put my trees, they weren't always to the very bottom of where I previously laid down paint. You see that? Like some of that blue is going underneath that.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah. So sometimes it's okay to like place them a little bit higher, a little bit lower on the white paper or on the painted part, like different ways that you can do that. I'm just gonna put a little bit here and there. Okay, this is feeling pretty good. So I can still see the top, my very first layer right here. And then I see my mid and now my dark. And we're gonna move on to step 5. We're gonna do our shadows. So I'm gonna grab my 6 and I'm gonna grab space blue. I wanna try and mix a dark value here. So that means I'm gonna be picking up quite a bit of paint. So I have space blue and a tiny bit of either yellow ochre or pine green. And then I'm just gonna kind of get rid of the excess water. I want this to be kind of like the dry brush technique. So you can even use your tea towel or paper towel here, and you can just, so I'm just kind of doing shadows underneath the trees that are going to the left. That needs to be rougher.
But that dry brush stroke was so good. Yes. Stop it. Oh. What?
And then you can touch your paper towel or your towel to get that excess color off. And then all of a sudden it's like, is that shadows? Is that a little bit of rock poking through?
Is it actually a frozen hill and there's water running underneath a layer of ice? We don't know.
We don't know. And then just on the back here, I'm just gonna do a little hint of it. I don't want it to be as dark a value.
Centuries in the making. Hill versus hill. This week on Let's Make Art.
And even if you wanted to, like you can do another cropping of trees right here. You can do like rocks right there. Like there's different things that you guys can do. And I'm gonna actually drop in just another layer of dark space blue. And by dark, I mean value. So I'm picking up a lot of paint, just dropping it in, letting there be a nice heavy shadow on some of the places. Okay, and now we're on our very last step. We're gonna do our snow. So I'm gonna grab my bleed-proof white and my round 2.
My eyes just shifted.
Yeah.
And now those look like snow drifts.
Snow drifts.
Yeah, like a drift of snow, like a gigantic pile of snow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna take my bleed-proof white, and on my trees that I painted, if they're dry, think about the layers of branches and when they stick out, and when there's snow falling, the branches catch the snow. So think about those layers, about where those breaks would be, where those layers would be on that tree, and start putting snow where those branches are catching it.
What if you had a lone tree at the end of the hill And it was decorated.
Yes. Or like what if you did like one big one with like a star on top of it?
And the Iron Giant walking towards it.
Yes, and that's the Iron Giant's tree.
Yes.
So you don't have to do every single tree, and you don't have to do every single branch on every single tree. We're kind of just giving enough information where it's just like, yes, it is snowing right now, and these trees are capturing the snow, and they have form, and it's kind of blizzardy, but maybe also kind of peaceful.
Totally peaceful. I've mentioned this book before, but a book that I read as a child that I loved was The Other Side of the Mountain. And it was about a boy who told his dad that he's going to run away, and his dad was like, yeah, I think every young child should run away. So he's like 12.
Okay.
He runs away. I don't remember exactly why. I was just thrilled at the fact of running away was accepted by his father.
Okay.
And he hollowed out a tree and lived in it.
Whoa.
Raised a falcon. It's an amazing book, but I'm getting some serious Other Side of the Mountain.
That sounds way cool.
Oh, such a good book.
Okay, now if you're going to put white in your medium value trees, like ones that are kind of in the distance, you can still use bleed-proof white, but water it down just a little bit so it doesn't stand out as much. Because if you do a bright white over here, it's going to compete. It's going to kind of take these two things that we've layered far away and bring it up like this, you know, instead of letting them be far. So like just keep that in mind. You can have snow on the far away ones, but they can't be as bright as the ones in the foreground. And then our last touch. And so I splattered snow on my sky. On my step out sheet, I splattered some snow. But I really feel like the salt work did a really great job giving that illusion of snow. So I'm just gonna do dots of snow here and there.
To really catch the sunlight reflection feel.
Yeah, to like give that little extra. I don't feel like I need to flicker it because I feel like I have so much texture with my salt. Where if you put salt down and you only got a little bit of salt work, like not too much, then I would go ahead and splatter.
One of my favorite things about snow is driving in it.
You love driving in snow?
I love to drive at night in the snow.
And it's coming at you and you feel like you're in like a
spaceship in Star Wars and or Star Trek. Yes.
Yes.
Totally.
So I'm just using my round 2, just doing drops of bleed-proof white. And then let's say you put in your shadows and you were going for a dry brush, but it was too wet and you have this big thick stroke of blue. Just take some bleed-proof white and put that in there.
Oh.
Break it up. This is why I love bleed-proof white. You know what I mean? I just feel like it lowers the stakes a little bit. And there we go.
Boom, bam.
Look at that. Is that fun? Okay, so I'm going to remove my tape here carefully, slowly, with love. Maybe even like sending some good happy thoughts to my watercolor paper. Like,
hot cocoa vibes to it.
Please don't tear on me. You're the best. I appreciate you. You know, just
yeah. You're cozy. We're cozy.
We're friends here.
Please don't rip.
Please don't rip.
Should have done a Christmas tone. That was my bad. Oh, paper, please. Do not rip. No, that's wrong.
Now this is not as exciting because I didn't paint the bottom of my paper, but still.
This is awkward.
Okay, we have one last side. Oh, look at that clean edge on that top.
So satisfying.
Yes. Now, you have salt on your paper. So you can either, if your painting is totally dry,
And
scrape it
remember,
off.
if you put dots of bleed-proof white, those things may smear.
Yeah, mine are still wet, so I'm trying to avoid them. So you can kind of scrape it off with your hand. You can leave it, especially if it's this small and fine, which is what I do, or I just stand it up and knock it off. And there's our painting.
Wow.
Ah.
Boom, bam.
Okay.
That's so good.
I actually spent a lot of time figuring out how to paint winter and snow scenes because I illustrated a Christmas book, Oh Holy Night, and I think we actually carry it.
We do.
And there's actually a scene that's pretty similar to this one in there. And it's so funny because while I was painting this, I was just thinking, like, I cannot wait to show you guys how to do this. It's so fun. And it seems complicated. It just takes a little bit of time. Just allow yourself to have layers. We know that you're busy, so if you need to pause this in between layers and go do something else, come back to it. Totally understand. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with. Everybody's is going to look different. Play with the colors, play with the format, play with your trees, play with the snow. You can add stuff to it. You can add stars. You can decorate the tree like Keenan said. You can add a sleigh,
yes,
maybe footprints or
maybe
something.
A path.
Yeah,
yes.
like please give yourself the permission to make your own decisions when it comes to your painting. This is yours. You're doing it. If you're on Instagram, tag us. We really want to see what you're painting. You can tag us at Let's Go Make Art or hashtag Let's Make Art. You can join our Facebook group called Let's Make Art Watercolor. And if you need any of these supplies, you can find them at letsmakeart.com. Keenan, always a pleasure.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys next time. Bye.